Okay, I thought I would do a short video about how to load the filament on your Ender 3, assuming you have an Ender 3. Most of the printers work similar to the way this one works as far as this style of printer. So I've got my roll of filament here. It will eventually be mounted on top of the printer. You can't see it right now. It's off the top of the screen or side of the screen the way it's rotated this way. But what I usually do, now I usually look at the filament. This one is not nice and straight. There are some wavy lines in here that could be bad for us later on. I typically don't like filament when it's all wavy like this because it could mean that it was tangled somewhere in wrapping. So this isn't ideal, but we're going to use it because it's what I've got right now, and we will see. So find the end of it. So normally, I just cut this off, but normally when you're storing filament, these spools have holes in them where you would want to go in and do something like this. Run the filament through there so that it doesn't come unwound when you're just having it sitting on the shelf or whatever you do to store it. But I just cut this off, so I hadn't done that. So usually it works better if you cut a really steep angle on here. So let's see if I can do something like that. Kind of like that, where I instead of cutting like this, I was doing something like this. All right, I'm going to mount the filament roll up top so it'll get out of the way here. And then what you do is you go in, and right here there should be a place for the filament to go into, and then this spring that you can adjust. There's a screw over here that you can apply more pressure on the filament or less pressure by tightening or loosening this screw. But it springs this little lever here, and your goal is to get the filament between the golden or brass drive gear, and this one just has an idler. It's not driven or anything. It's just a pulley on this side or a bearing on this side. And so you want to get your filament between those two, and then it's going to have to go through a slot here or a hole in here and out into this tube. Sometimes that works just right off the bat, like it did this time. And it's usually better or more likely to work if you've cut that steep angle on the end of the filament. If it doesn't work, maybe you just can't get it to get into this tube, just unscrew this fitting, run the filament through there, and then slide the tube over the top of the filament, and that'll make it work. So you just pull this and push the filament all the way until it stops, and you're loaded up there. Now there's still some more. There might be filament left in the extruder down here from the previous print. This one has never printed, at least I have never printed with it. I don't know if it had a test run or something like that, but there might be some old filament in there. And so you'll have to heat the nozzle up to actually get the filament the rest of the way loaded. Right now it's just close to loaded. To heat the filament, so now you maybe want to finish loading, or maybe you want to unload. You're gonna have to heat the filament to do that. So let's turn around here and see if we can get a view of our screen. Let's see, the camera's being really crazy. There we go. We might have to turn that light off. All right, turn it on. Hopefully we can get enough contrast here to see what's on the screen. I think so. I think that looks readable. So the knob here lets you select different things. We'll go to prepare, and all of the printers are going to have a different set of options on here depending on what firmware they're running. But this is the generic, most common set. So prepare, and we can preheat for whatever. This one has two different materials, PLA and ABS, so we'll preheat for PLA. And then this first option preheats the bed and the nozzle. So if you're about to print, that's what you want to do. This one, the one that says end, is just the hot end, the part where we're going to load the filament. And maybe if you just want to preheat the bed for some reason, you can do that also, but we just want to preheat the end or both if we wanted to, although that's going to take longer to do. So I'm going to do just the end. And then it'll take us back to our status screen, and over here you can see our set point is 200 degrees, this is Celsius, and then our current temperature is in the 40s right now, and it's rising. So that's what we want. We want it to get up. PLA will begin to melt in the 180 degree range. It actually gets soft in the like 70 degrees Celsius range. All right, so we're at 90. I'm going to go ahead and raise the axis here. So let's get a different view, a little bit wider view here. Something like that. I'm going to raise it. Right now it's not locked or anything, so I could raise it manually by turning the lead screw in the back. But I'm going to use the screen to do that while it's heating up. So let's go to prepare. Let's home, auto home, or sometimes it's home all. This one says auto home. And so it will go in and find the 000 point, which for this printer is that front left corner. So that's the homing routine. And now I can use the menus here to drive with the, I'm clicking the button, prepare, move axis. I'm going to move Z up in increments of 10 millimeters. Let's go up, I don't know, 100 millimeters. So it's kind of up off the bottom here, so we might can get a view of it. Although it's going to possibly go off our screen. Let's see. We can readjust. And we want to see up under there a little bit. Won't be able to see much, I guess. Let's see if we can see some of the screen too, though. Actually, let's just move the extruder over here. Prepare, move axis, that's the X direction, 10. This whole thing's 220, so let's go halfway. I guess that's halfway. All right. Now we have kind of the screen over here and the extruder kind of in the middle. All right, we should be heated up. Going back to the main menu. If you leave it alone for a while, it will go back to the main menu on its own. Yes, we're at 200, which will be plenty enough to heat up our filament. We've loaded it at least down to here. Now, there's a couple of points that we need to make sure about. One of them is that this tube right here, the Bowden tube that holds the filament or guides it into the hot end, is seated all the way down. Like, I don't want to be able to push this tube any further down. It needs to be all the way in. It is advisable on the first time you do this to take this tube out. So you would pull out your little clip, push, I don't want to do it right now, but push this, in this case it's white ferrule surrounding thing, push it down, pull the tube out, and make sure it's cut off square with itself so that the end of the tube, the white tube, is square with its own axis. And then shove it all the way down in there. If you leave any gaps, if it's cut at an angle or it's not forced down all the way against its seat inside here, you'll have leaks, filament leaks. All right, let's go to move axis again. So prepare, move axis. Extruder is at the bottom down here. It's kind of off of our screen now. Extruder. I'm going to only move in 1 millimeter increments for now. And what I want to, I'm going to do 5. And so what I want to check is that I can see that filament is loading into here. It may not come out of the nozzle just yet, but I'm checking back in the back to make sure that the extruder motor is turning. It won't turn a lot. And it looks like filament is feeding in. Oh, and we have our first little strand of filament coming out of here. So let's do a little bit more. So there's 20. Now this won't necessarily, I put 20 here. that doesn't necessarily mean that this piece will be 20 millimeters long. So obviously this is way more than 20 millimeters long, but you have to think about, what this told me is that I extruded 20 millimeters of filament here, or right here. So 20 millimeters of filament passed through the extruder, but this is a much larger diameter than what is coming out of the actual nozzle. So more length will come out of the nozzle, but the volume should stay the same. There is some leaking, like oozing, this extra bit oozed out. So there's some springiness in the system that you haven't really accounted for in that mental calculation, but you can kind of see that now we've got filament loaded. We should be ready to print. We'll do a short video later on some of the other things. So some other things we need to do are make sure this bed is level. We need to make sure that we know how to slice a file, and so there's several other things we need to do, but this is one of those, is get filament loaded into the hot end of your printer. To unload filament, heat it up. Probably good idea to go through your menu and do some negative movements here, so make it go backwards, the extruder axis to move backwards to pull some of the filament out. But you may not have to do that. You can usually pull it by hand. In fact, there's a process pulling it by hand to actually clean the nozzle out. But you do want to heat it up. If it's solidified in there, it melted and solidified, you don't want to pull that out because it's not the same shape as it was before, and it probably won't come out at all. So you need to heat it up before you remove the filament, and then put some new filament in. All right, we'll come back in another video with leveling the bed.